curious, observant tone. Deep inside a perfectly calibrated machine, a single gear tooth skips. The system keeps running, the tiny error vanishing into the overall motion. In industrial project management, that skipped tooth looks like a phone call from a vendor, letting you know a shipment of control panels is going to be 5 days late. 5 days on a 40-week schedule. The math tells you it's a rounding error. You log it in your own notes, but you don't bring it to the project sponsor. There is no mathematical need to trigger an alarm over something so small. You assume the schedule has enough inherent slack, what project managers call float, to absorb a minor vendor delay without anyone further down the line ever noticing. Faced with a tiny variance on a massive timeline, the easiest choice is to stay quiet and let the buffer do its job. But in this specific case, that 5-day slip didn't resolve itself. By the time the project manager finally brought it to their sponsor, it had compounded into an 11-week delay and a severely strained client relationship. This newsletter from execution strategist Vinay Vijay Raut reveals why this happens. He writes that a schedule doesn't break in a single moment. It breaks in the silence between when you notice the drift and when you act on it. Looking at the performance data here, we see the true scale of the problem. 73% of major schedule overruns trace back to a minor, unaddressed deviation just like that one. The vendor being late didn't derail the project. The project derailed because a small error was treated as harmless noise, triggering an invisible chain reaction. The mistake started with a misunderstanding of how time actually works in a complex plan. The project manager assumed float was a universal shock absorber, evenly distributed across the schedule. In theory, an extra 5 days simply shifts subsequent work to the right. But this specific path lacked ordinary float. The slip pushed the work into a rigid inspection window. Missing it meant instantly facing a mandatory 6-week wait for the next slot. Time in a schedule behaves differently when hard external constraints are involved. Assuming you have a buffer without actually verifying the downstream dependencies is a mathematical trap. That sudden 6-week gap threw the entire testing phase completely out of alignment, and it exposed another hidden vulnerability. A second, entirely separate vendor had meticulously built their own deployment sequence around the original dates. Facing a 6-week idle period with nothing to do, the second vendor quietly rebooked their specialized crew to another job. The delay multiplied again. The financial toll of letting this play out is severe. According to the breakdown here, catching a deviation after it cascades costs 6 times more on average than addressing it in the exact same week. When you view a schedule as a simple checklist, you miss the interconnected ecosystem. One unmanaged delay creates a ripple effect that silently unravels the plan. To stop these chain reactions before they start, you need a disciplined system. Built directly from the lessons of that 11-week overrun, the pivot framework offers a structural antidote. It starts with float discipline. Teams are required to verify their slack time against external constraints, rather than blindly assuming it exists. Then's the true impact rule. Managers must trace effects at least 2 dependency layers deep. Finally, the smallest fix rule. Instead of compressing the timeline, you isolate and repair only the specific broken link. You have to replace the very human urge to hide small errors with a rigorous mathematical system designed to track reality. This translates into a strict operational rule. The moment a critical path diverges, managers have exactly 48 hours to log the deviation, isolate the root cause, and re-baseline the schedule. As Raut notes in his closing thoughts, deviations are not a sign that your plan failed. They are simply a sign that your plan met reality. The master schedule was never asking the project manager to be perfect. It was only ever asking them to pay attention. Mastering schedule execution doesn't require perfectly predicting the future. It requires ruthlessly managing the present, the very moment it begins to drift.